I was a loyal employee who played by the rules, worked overtime without asking for extra, and believed in ethics, even when nobody was watching. But when my new boss asked me to lie to cover his shady deals, I said no. He fired me. What he didn't know was, I had kept records of everything, and I wasn't going to stay silent. I never thought standing up for the truth would be the thing that destroyed my career. My name's Alex Carter, and for 7 years, I worked at Northbridge Logistics, a mid-sized supply chain company in Chicago. I wasn't flashy, I wasn't climbing over people to get ahead, but I was damn good at what I did. Project manager for high-level accounts, negotiating freight deals, overseeing contracts, and making sure our books were clean. My old boss, Linda, respected me for that. She used to say, "I sleep better knowing you're the one watching the numbers." But then Linda retired early due to medical issues, and everything changed. That's when Russell Jennings stepped in, the new boss. Younger, louder, corporate slick. The kind of guy who wore a $10,000 watch and let you know it. From day one, he wanted things done his way. Fast, profitable, and without unnecessary red tape, as he called it. Red tape, of course, meaning rules, ethics, and compliance. I tried to stay optimistic, give him a chance. But 2 weeks into his leadership, he asked me to backdate an invoice from one of our international clients, a seafood import deal. I blinked. "Russell, that's not just shady. It's illegal." He waved it off like I was being dramatic. "Nobody cares. It's just to meet quarterly numbers. Everyone does it." I refused. I made it clear. I don't lie, I don't cook books, and I don't risk prison for anybody. He didn't like that. From that moment, the vibe changed. I became too rigid, not a team player, resistant to change. Within a month, he pulled me off 2 major accounts I had built from scratch and reassigned me to low-priority clients. My emails started getting ignored, meetings were scheduled without me, and I could see it coming, the push-out. But I'm not stupid. I didn't just sit there and take it. I started documenting everything. Every suspicious invoice, every shady client file, every off-the-books favor Russell approved. I kept copies in my personal drive, emailed notes to myself, logged times and dates. Not because I was planning revenge, but because I had a feeling I might need to protect myself. And I was right. 2 months after I said no to his request, HR called me in. They said I was being let go due to restructuring. No explanation, no severance, just a cold handshake and a box to clear my desk. But what really shattered me wasn't the firing. It was the look on Russell's face. That smug, satisfied smile as he leaned on the doorway of his glass office, watching me walk out like he'd just taken out the trash. I drove home in silence that day, my head buzzing, not just with anger, but with a sense of betrayal so deep I felt physically sick. I had given my best years to that company. Skipped holidays, worked weekends, fixed messes that weren't mine. And this was how they repaid me. My savings weren't great, my rent was high, and jobs in my field weren't easy to come by without references. Russell made sure I wouldn't get those either. I found out through a recruiter that they were quietly blacklisting me, labeling me as difficult and disloyal. He didn't just fire me. He tried to erase me. That's when the switch flipped in my mind. If he wanted war, fine. But I wasn't going to come at him with gossip or emotion. I was going to take him down with facts, with evidence, with the very lies he asked me to help create. It started with one file, a shipment record to the port of Savannah that was marked as domestic but was actually international. That was a customs violation. Then I found the falsified fuel tax documents. Then came the big one, a wire transfer record from a subsidiary in Vietnam marked as consulting fees but sent to a clearly fake shell company. It was money laundering. I had it all. At first, I considered going to HR, but I knew that was a dead end. Russell had them wrapped around his finger. So I went higher. Quietly, I compiled a dossier and reached out to a contact I had once met at a logistics compliance conference. Maya, now working for a Federal Trade Commission unit. I didn't tell her everything in the email. I just said, "I have evidence of ongoing federal violations inside Northbridge Logistics, and am willing to cooperate." She replied the same day, "Let's talk." The next week was a blur. Phone calls, encrypted file sharing, background checks. Maya wasn't just interested, she was alarmed. What I had wasn't just shady, it was criminal. She looped in a financial crimes investigator, and within days, an official case was opened. They asked me to stay quiet, to not tip anyone off. I agreed. But part of me was terrified. What if Russell found out? What if he came after me legally? I didn't have money for lawyers. But the truth was, I had already lost everything. I had nothing left to lose. That gave me courage. Then, 2 months after I'd been fired, something incredible happened. I received a formal subpoena to testify before a grand jury. This wasn't some internal slap-on-the-wrist audit. This was serious. I was nervous, but I showed up, clean suit, notes in hand, and told the truth. Everything. How he manipulated numbers, laundered funds, exploited loopholes, and retaliated against anyone who questioned him. After the hearing, Maya told me, "You've done more than you know. We're going after the entire operation." And that's when I realized Russell didn't just mess with the wrong employee. He underestimated the one person who actually knew where all the bodies were buried. I didn't have to destroy him. He had already lit the match. I just handed over the gasoline. But this was only the beginning. Because as the feds built their case behind the scenes, Russell was still walking around like a king, throwing parties, expanding shady partnerships, and promoting his cronies. He had no idea the walls were closing in. But he was about to find out, and I was going to watch the whole thing crumble. The thing about people like Russell is, they never see it coming. They're so used to stepping on people and getting away with it that they forget something important. People remember. Especially the ones you crushed on your way up. A month after I testified, the investigation went fully active, but covert. That meant agents were quietly auditing Northbridge's internal systems, watching wire transfers, and building a paper trail. Maya told me to keep a low profile, so I moved back to my hometown of Dayton and picked up freelance work under a different LLC just to pay rent. But in the background, I kept an eye on everything. Every time someone from my old office posted a new work story or a client tagged the company in a deal, I bookmarked it. Because the feds needed a timeline, and I was the only one who knew which moves were real and which were smoke and mirrors. But Russell, in his arrogance, kept getting louder. He announced a huge partnership with an import company in Malaysia, one I knew was linked to the shell accounts. He started showing up in trade magazines, giving interviews about disrupting the logistics space, all while committing federal fraud on a level even he didn't fully grasp. But the feds were patient. They weren't trying to embarrass him. They were trying to bury him. Then, one quiet Thursday afternoon, I got the email. He's going to be served. Stay alert. And within 48 hours, everything began unraveling, publicly. It started with a financial news blog posting a blind item about a mid-sized U.S. logistics firm under investigation for money laundering and falsified customs declarations. Within hours, LinkedIn blew up. I watched old colleagues panic, some even deleting their titles, others privately messaging me asking if I'd heard anything. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Because the next day, Russell's face showed up in a headline: CEO of Northbridge Logistics under federal investigation. The article detailed subpoenas, a possible indictment, and ongoing cooperation from a former employee with knowledge of internal practices. Russell's empire was no longer invincible, it was radioactive. But it got even better. See, once that news dropped, former employees started talking. One by one, people came out of the shadows: bookkeepers, junior managers, even a client rep, each sharing their own horror stories of being pressured to lie, fudge reports, or cover up suspicious transactions. Turns out, I wasn't the only one Russell had burned. I was just the first to light a match. And now it was a wildfire. The board of directors, those same people who once called me a problem, immediately placed Russell on leave, but it was too late. Shareholders pulled out. Clients cut ties. And inside the building, chaos exploded. I had a friend still in the company, Dylan, from finance, who texted me under the radar. "Dude, it's insane. They just walked Russell out. He was screaming about betrayal. He thinks someone set him up." I didn't reply. I just stared at the message, heart racing, a strange mixture of satisfaction and disbelief surging through me. I had imagined this moment for months, but now that it was here, it was almost too poetic. And it wasn't even over. Because within a week, Russell was officially indicted, facing multiple counts of wire fraud, conspiracy to commit tax evasion, and financial misconduct related to international shipping. He posted bail, of course, wore a suit to court, smiled like a psychopath for the cameras. But the damage was done. The prosecutors had years' worth of evidence, most of it from the files I gave them. Maya called me after his arraignment. "You're a hero, Alex," she said. This case is going to make headlines for a long time. But I didn't feel like a hero. I felt vindicated. For the first time in months, I slept peacefully. No nightmares about bills or missed calls. No more rage dreams where I'm yelling in an empty boardroom. Unheard and invisible. Just quiet. Peaceful, earned silence. But the best part, the real twist, came a few weeks later. I received an email from the same board that once tossed me out like trash. They asked if I'd be open to consulting during the transition period, as they tried to clean up the mess Russell left behind. I almost laughed. These people had let me walk out with a cardboard box and no exit interview. Now they wanted my help? I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I waited a week. Then I responded with the most satisfying 2 lines I've ever typed in my life. Thank you for your message. Unfortunately, I only work with companies that value integrity. Send. That was it. I closed the laptop and smiled. But just as I thought the story was done, something happened. A journalist reached out to me. A real one, investigative, someone who had been following the case and somehow got wind of my role. She asked if I'd be willing to go on record. At first, I said no. I didn't want to be the center of anything. But then I thought about all the people Russell hurt. The ones who couldn't speak up. The ones still scared. And I said yes. The story ran a month later. The whistleblower who took down a CEO. An exclusive look inside the Northbridge scandal. My name wasn't hidden. My face wasn't blurred. And for once, I wasn't ashamed. The article went viral. LinkedIn blew up again, but this time with recruiters. Companies who wanted someone like me. Someone who stood up when it mattered. I took a job with a clean, ethical logistics firm that offered full benefits and remote flexibility. And within 6 months, I was promoted to lead compliance officer. Not because I played politics, but because I earned it. The last I heard of Russell, he was trying to broker a plea deal to avoid prison time. The man who once fired me for not lying was now begging prosecutors to believe he didn't know what he was doing. But the files don't lie. The wire transfers don't lie. And I sure as hell wasn't lying when I said I'd never let him get away with it. This wasn't just revenge. This was justice served cold and clean. There's a strange kind of silence that follows a storm. The kind that almost feels too calm, too clean, like the air's been vacuumed of all noise and guilt. That was my life in the months after Russell's indictment. Everything slowed down. No more headlines. No more late-night emails from Maya or quiet updates from Dylan. Just a world slowly putting itself back together while a man who thought he was invincible tried to bargain his way out of a prison sentence. I kept living, peacefully, honestly, fully. My new company was everything Northbridge wasn't. The CEO actually listened. The board had ethics, and when I flagged a minor discrepancy in a customs declaration during my second week, they didn't punish me, they thanked me. That moment felt surreal, like being seen for the first time. I was thriving quietly, steadily. But the world wasn't done with Russell yet. Because by early spring, the Department of Justice announced formal charges, 6 felony counts, including conspiracy to commit fraud, tax evasion, falsifying international shipping documents, and obstruction of justice. The trial date was set for June, and the prosecution had built a devastating case. Dozens of witnesses, internal emails, financial records, wiretaps, but most damning of all, my files. My name was listed as a primary cooperating witness, and I had to testify in court. So, I flew to D.C., suited up, and walked into the federal courthouse with my head high. Russell was there, of course, sitting behind his lawyers in a $1,000 suit with dead eyes. He looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but spiritually, like the weight of what he'd done had finally cracked the armor. And when I took the stand, he didn't even look at me. I told the truth. All of it. No embellishments. No dramatics. Just dates, facts, emails, files. I walked the court through the lies, the pressure, the day he fired me for not backing the fraud, and the silent fear I carried for months. When I was done, the room was dead quiet. Even Russell's lawyer didn't cross-examine me much. Because you can't cross-examine a file. The numbers told the story, and the story was damning. The trial lasted 3 weeks. And when the jury came back, they were unanimous on all counts. Guilty. Russell was denied immediate bail after sentencing due to flight risk. They put him in cuffs right there in the courtroom, and I watched the man who once told me I'd never work in logistics again get marched out by 2 U.S. Marshals. It should have felt like the end, and in many ways, it was. But life, it turns out, had more for me. Because in the months after Russell's conviction, that viral article about my whistleblower story kept gaining traction. TEDx organizers reached out. I was invited to speak at conferences on ethics and business. Universities asked me to guest lecture for MBA students. And slowly, I went from being the guy who leaked files to something more, someone who stood for something. A year after the trial, I published a book, The Line We Cross, detailing the events from start to finish, not just Russell's crimes, but the emotional toll of being pressured to lie, the guilt of staying silent, the loneliness of telling the truth in a world that rewards silence. It hit the bestseller list in 2 weeks. I wasn't trying to be famous, but people needed to hear it. Because every company has a Russell, and every Russell thinks they're untouchable. Until someone stands up. I used the royalties to start a foundation, the Integrity Initiative, dedicated to protecting whistleblowers and training young professionals on ethical decision-making in corporate environments. We offered legal aid, mental health support, and confidential guidance for people just like I had been, trapped, afraid, unsure who to trust. And we changed lives. I got emails from nurses, teachers, junior bankers, even a nonprofit worker who caught her boss embezzling. Because of your story, one wrote, I spoke up. I didn't let them silence me. That meant more than any paycheck I'd ever earned. As for Northbridge, the company survived, but barely. They restructured, sold off assets, and changed their name to distance themselves from the scandal. Most of the old board retired. A few faced investigations of their own. Dylan left and joined my new firm, where we now run compliance side by side. And Maya? She was promoted to Assistant Director of Financial Crimes at the DOJ. We still talk every month, sometimes professionally, sometimes over whiskey. You know, she told me once, we don't often see guys like Russell actually go down. You made it happen, but I didn't do it for revenge. Not really. That was the fire at first, sure. But what kept me going wasn't hatred, it was clarity. The knowledge that someone had to do the right thing. That truth doesn't whisper, it roars eventually. You just have to be brave enough to hold the mic. Russell was sentenced to 22 years in federal prison with no chance of parole before serving at least 18. The judge called it one of the most egregious breaches of corporate trust the court has seen. His assets were seized. His properties auctioned. His face, once on the cover of Forbes, now appeared on government offender registries. But me? I live quietly now, peacefully. I bought a house in the hills, nothing flashy, just peace. Some nights, I still think about that day, the moment he told me to lie or get out. And I'm grateful, because he did get me out of the company, out of a toxic spiral, out of silence. And that choice led me here. Not broken, not bitter, just better. So if you're ever in that moment, when someone powerful asks you to sell your soul for their comfort, remember this. Sometimes doing the right thing costs you everything. But what you gain is worth it all. Every single time. If you love this story and want more jaw-dropping tales of revenge, betrayal, and sweet justice, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a moment. Your support helps bring these powerful stories to life.